would say I got into media accidentally because I come from a technology background. When you look at research, you need to be very clear as to what is that you want to achieve in terms of objectives. If you really look at our industry, okay, there's a lot of information which is available. Often I feel people are just scratching the surface, which means they're not taking that route of maybe doing deep dives or whatever it is. This part of the world was never in my list to be explored. And when I landed here, I was handed a book called Media Fact Book, because in that Media Fact Book, it gave me a media landscape of 23 markets in West Africa. And I said, wow, this is like wealth of information, and how come I didn't get it when I wanted it?
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Stories and Journeys, where we explore the transformative power of learning, growth, and resilience. Join us as we uncover untold narratives and ignite curiosity. My name is Oluwatimileyin Oyedeji, and joining us here today is an OG in the game. An OG with almost 4 decades of experience, touching lives, impacting brands, impacting businesses, training people to become better leaders, giving people opportunities to ensure that they blossom and thrive. He is a media expert across the continents of Africa and globally. He currently sits as the Chief Executive Officer, Digital X Plus, for West and Central Africa. He's no other person than Patrick Gomes. Hi, Patrick.
Hello, happy to be here.
Thank you so much for accepting the invitation.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for making it here.
Thanks for inviting me here.
Absolutely. We were very sure that we're going to learn so much from you. Absolutely. And our audience as well will also learn as much, from you as well. So I'll get straight into it, right? Because I know you're a very busy man. The journey for you started a couple of years ago, with ABCL in India as an executive. Fast forward till now, we've touched on so many brands, helped so many businesses, but right now, you currently sit as a C-suite leader, one of the top agencies here in Nigeria. If you think back at that journey of yours, where you started, in ABCL till now, how has that journey been like for you as a person?
I think for me, it has been really exciting. My first job after my graduation was with a company called ABCL, as you rightly mentioned, which is nothing but, by a very well-known celebrity called Amitabh Bachchan. So it was his company, and in his company is where I possibly picked up that, you don't need to be with one company which does only one thing. You can be with a company which does many things. So they were into producing films, they were into producing music, they were into marketing things, not only for the urban audience, but they had something for the rural audience also, which was called video on wheels kind of a stuff. So many people who grew up, and fast forwarded to where we were, at that point in time, not everybody had access to television. So the video on wheels, the concept was to ensure that we reach out to the rural India, and they get to see the entertainment which possibly the urban counterparts in India have seen. So that's the beginning. I spent about 2 years there, but that was a non-media experience. But it was, a gamut of marketing things that were happening there. I would say I got into media accidentally because I come from a technology background, and for me to choose that company was, something which came on a platter, I would say. Right, and from there it got started. But after that, I joined a company called Carat, which is pronounced as Carat but spelled as Carat, Parrot. That's where my media journey started, and fortunately, in the entire phase of my career, I have been with 3 startups. Okay, I call it startup because Carat was a startup then in India. And as I progressed, there was another juncture which I came to, which was Starcom Media West, and that's where Starcom was there always in most part of the world, so in India, but Media West was something which was getting launched in many many countries, and I was fortunate to be part of Media West, which is again a startup. I would say to ensure that I am able to shape that business. And coming to this part of the world, I joined OMD, which is part of the Omnicom Media Group. That's where we ensure that we also have a discipline for digital, and Digitex Plus is a startup for me. So that's where so the experience along the journey that I have had has been interesting. And like I mentioned, ABCL was an experience which gave me many things, but that was the very start of my career. As I moved from agencies to maybe markets from India to Middle East, where I was based, and then I went back, to India. I was fortunate to work with a company called Starcom Media West there also. So Starcom Media West gave me an opportunity to not just focus on media, but also on various disciplines, which included entertainment, sports, which included BTL, which included also rural, and also on branding, etc., etc. So I would say it's been an exciting, over 3 decades of experience, and fortunate enough to experience different textures and different maybe challenges in life. And along the journey, I think I have not only won many accolades, but there have been a configuration of things which I would want to maybe speak. For example, I come from a media background. So in a media background, if you really need to ensure that you play a role of a branding when it comes to retail experience, it's a very difficult one, right? You cannot, because you have a desk job and you're possibly doing what you need to be doing from your laptop, etc., etc. But you really need to ensure that you play a role in a retail branding environment. How would you, for example, if you're a number savvy person, how would you do it? Which is where we had research, and from research you were able to identify, and this was a challenge which came to us by way of a client called a mobile store, right? Mobile store was essentially in the area of launching several format of stores, and they wanted to not just cover urban but semi-urban and rural, essentially pan-India kind of a stuff. So that's where we had access to research and tools, and from there we could tell them that where all they should launch their stores. Okay, what is the radius that store should cover? Okay, and what are the different types of store they should launch? So that is type A, type B, type C kind of a stuff, which is basically types essentially means that shop in shop kind of a one. Type A becomes a flagship store, and so on and so forth. It also basically captured, if it's catering to a radius, what is the socioeconomic of that radius, what is the purchasing power of that radius, and so on and so forth. We were successfully able to launch mobile store and ensure that it expands pan India with almost 3,500 stores pan India. So again, there is a lot of science in that. So when we see a store, it's not just a store which is based on some science, based on some potential, based on the coverage it can have, and so on and so forth. That's me from a media background trying to do something, and that is something which was even shortlisted for best in research by our advertising, the Grammys, what is called in India called MBs, right? So that's a great accolade, and I think over a period of time I've been trying to ensure that I test myself, not just by doing things what you think is right, but also ensuring that the jury also recognizes that work, and so on and so forth. So that's how it has been, and in life you need to have challenges, right? Otherwise, it's like if you eat food, your food can't be of maybe a single color. It has to have that multicolor feel. It has to have texture to make it more appetizing, right? If you look at a house, you cannot have a house which is just white everywhere, or one color. You need to have that color which basically brings that contrast. Your maybe your living room has to have different, maybe your curtains have to be different. There has to be some flowers, there has to be something which basically gives you, so that's how your house looks welcoming, that's how your food looks appetizing, and so on and so forth. That's how I've seen basically my challenge. You need to ensure that you need to do different things as you progress. Otherwise, life will become monotonous, and then you don't find joy in maybe doing the same thing again and again. So that's me in short, trying to take different challenges and ensuring that there is success. If not success, there is learning for you to make progress.
I mean, I find that very insightful because I know you very well, firsthand. As a matter of fact, you had employed me, a couple of years ago. Correct. Which is something I'll touch on as we go on. But something that stood out for me from what you just said now is, your background, from media, entertainment, storytelling, BTL, when you think about all of those bits, of experiences or jobs you've done across those various areas, right? How would you say that those things have helped you position helped you position today, as that CISOT, leader with very keen, attention to details, ensuring that your agency, for example, today wins as many pitches awards as possible. So, from your background, the question therefore is, how has tech, media, entertainment, positioned you today or helped you deliver, as a leader today?
So, you when you get into something accidentally, okay, not by choice. And as I said, media have been an accidental discovery for me, not by choice, because I came from a technology background. It was very important for me to ensure that you had that knowledge of what needs to be done. Okay, and for me, I'm a self learner. So I did not come from a planning background. Nobody taught me planning, right? So there are schools where you had people joining our industry, which are specialized. People go there, learn, train, and do internship, and then they join our industry in India. But I came from a different background, so I had to ensure that I keep up to the knowledge that they have, even more than that. So I had to do a lot of self-learning, right? So I had to also do a lot of practical. I had to ensure that I'm able to maybe walk the talk, right? So that was very important for me. And I think today what I am is a simple maybe equation of maybe what I say is all the symbols that you can possibly think of. So maybe use a plus, use a multiply, use maybe a divided by, use your open bracket, close bracket, square brackets, etc., etc. All the symbols have a lot of meaning. So even if you use a minus, there have been some minuses, there have been some divisions, and so on and so forth. So that's, in simple equation, that's me. All symbols put together is equal to me, right? So exclamation mark. I mean, there have been many moments in my life where there has been an exclamation mark. There have been question mark. There. So you find joy in doing everything. Like I mentioned about the mobile store experience, the sheer joy that I could possibly be instrumental in launching a format, okay, which is very new. It didn't exist before, right? Of course, at that point in time, there were very few stores, but there were stores that were selling maybe multi-brand or whatsoever. But if you're launching something which is a flagship, and you can actually think of research helping you, is a big boost for me. That's a confidence, right? So that confidence helped me a lot to ensure that you can definitely do many things, and you don't have to be dependent on maybe specialized people to do things. And that's where I am currently. So you pick things, you try, you work with it and ensure that there is success. It's no success, then pick it and possibly learn from it.
Beautiful. I want to double click on research, like you mentioned, and I also want to tap into your wealth of knowledge across various markets.
Correct.
Now, you've worked in Asia, you worked in Middle East, you work in Africa and other markets, and going back to what you said about the stores that the format you guys created, you tied so much to research. From your wealth of knowledge from all of this market, what would you say that research play, in birthing or discovering cultural nuances, that propel insights that then help in coming up in marketing campaigns that are impactful?
Beautiful. So typically when you look at research is done by looking at a sample, right? So you look at a sample which possibly is a representation of the universe that you're trying to tap into, right? And in research you work with a error of margin. Okay, so you cannot, for lack of resources and lack of I would say, investment and time at hand. You cannot go and maybe possibly interview everybody. So there's a bit of error of margin which you have to, work with. So typically, the acceptable norm is 5% error of margin. You can work with. Now, when you look at research, you need to be very clear as to what is that you want to achieve in terms of objectives, right? So I'll give you a simple example of what we have done in this part of the world called CCP, called Consumer Connection Panel, right? And so what led to that is also equally important because there are gaps currently. If the gaps didn't exist, possibly we wouldn't have gone that route. And we know the gap that currently exists because we do not have a syndicated tool that is possibly, world class and, giving us the information that we need and ensuring that it's a reflection of what it is. Certainly, we do have a syndicated tool, but not the latest as we need currently, as we've seen in other developed and developing markets, right? So this consumer connection panel is a tool that basically taps into that sample which is currently existing in 18 cities or 18 towns in Lagos, in Nigeria. And not only that, we've just also ensured that it is not just covering Nigeria, but it's also covering other parts of the West Africa, which is Ghana, and now we're looking at Benin as a market. So when you look at that sample, so in Nigeria we have 6,000 sample, to whom we are basically on a daily basis trying to ask questions which are of importance to us. One is definitely on a recurring basis is the media behavior. What do they watch? What do they listen to? And more detailed in terms of the genre of program they watch, the station they listen to, time belt and all that stuff. So that is the regular media behavior. And the good thing is they're able to now get almost daily media habits of consumers, so to say. So currently there's a gap, we do not have it, and therefore that route is where we've gone. Not only that, we've said, if it is so flat in terms of what we want to capture, then there will not be maybe excitement in what we want to achieve. Okay, so how do you ensure that you bring that excitement? Which is where we said, we need to also layer it with a very good understanding of consumer, right? Not just media behavior, but a very good understanding about the consumer. And that consumer understanding can come from various categories that you want to understand in detail. For example, let's say I want to understand about tea consumption, right? So the tea consumption is maybe an habit that I would want to understand in terms of their daily habits, so that you are able to identify that moment of truth, right? And there is an applicability of that also in terms of moment of truth. I mean, if you really want to ensure that you are identifying that gem where you want to create that, or rather you find that moment of truth as to when to advertise, that's the whole journey. So if you know what you want to achieve, that's why you get into what we call as the ad hoc surveys, which are done, they're quantitative surveys, but you do it with a question and answer kind of a stuff. And they're done online, whether we do it web, whether we do it app, whether we do it SMS, it all depends in terms of the type of audience we would want to reach. But there are multi-format questionnaire, right? So now simple thing is, if I pick up something which I feel I need to validate, for example, maybe in the northern market, especially during Ramadan, the consumption of tea is very different, right? And they prefer flavored tea, they prefer maybe different colored teas and so on and so forth. So this was a question saying that, okay, fine, if I've understood why is there a particular need for somebody to consume flavored tea, especially in northern market, in contrast to maybe what Lagos would have, and why colored, etc., etc. That's where you basically ensure that you get into a deeper understanding, which you call as qualitative. So you basically have maybe 10 representatives or maybe 20 representatives which are following that same cohort, selected, whether it's women, maybe in that age group, maybe in Kano, picked up, and we basically set up WhatsApp, groups. And there's a moderator who will possibly, moderate that whole discussion with a discussion guide. Okay, and we are just observers there. So the moderator will then ask the questions, and the respondents were basically 10 women from maybe Kano who are there on that WhatsApp group. They're answering those questions, and those questions or that discussion map or discussion guide has been designed based on our observations. So understand that we are capturing media. We want to find moment of truth. We went into the quantitative, which is again the ad hoc survey. using multi-format approach, and then you get into qualitative understanding. The whole journey, basically, when you weave it together, it tells you a story, right? And that story is very important. Now imagine you sitting in your office on your laptop, you are not able to get this done till the time you activate these things. And activating these things are with an objective. And once you know that you have a very good understanding of the entire story, you have an approach which you want to maybe then leverage, right? So that's how research typically helps us. And there's no end to research. When you look at media, certainly media behavior is one thing which may not drastically change. For example, COVID may not happen always, right? Certainly consumption of media habit change when it comes to festivals like maybe Christmas or maybe Ramadan or whatsoever, right? So those are changes which we'll always see. But if you need to ensure that you have a very good understanding, a very good pulse of the market, this research is very handy. This research actually helps you understand many things which otherwise you may not understand, right? Simple example, out of curiosity, I went to many market visits in India, and when I go for market visit, I come with wealth of knowledge, right? So simple thing is, if let's say for example, toilet soaps. I worked on a client called Godrej back then in India, and they're into multiple categories. One of them is bathing soap, the toilet soap that we call it. So when you go for market visit, you discover that when you go with the sales team, they have a different way of dealing with the retailers and the distributor, right? And they have a different way. So when we look at advertising, we feel that okay, media is one thing, but no, media is maybe just 1/5 of what the actual marketing ecosystem is like. There's a last mile approach with these salespeople are trying to achieve with the distributors and the retailers, and how they market, and how that the last mile market, or rather retailer, is trying to market to the consumer is very different, and every market has a different understanding. So when you go, you realize that hey, you're just doing a portion of the job, you're not doing the entire job, right? And if you think that you're doing great, you're not doing great. You're just maybe in that jigsaw puzzle, one of those pieces in that puzzle, right? So, or maybe you're one of the levers in the entire ecosystem, but there's the entire ecosystem which is working on its own. So many things, simple thing like when you go for a market visit, I picked up that that when you look at the expiry date of the product, it basically tells you whether this product is selling, right? So you go and do your competitive understanding. You say that there is the term that we use in media, which is called SOE and SOV, right? So is it, that is okay, good to understand, but the reality is there in the market. So go in the market and go in maybe in one of the retail shop and see that whether you are able to understand from the expiry date of the product, is it matching with your share of voice, right? So we've established correlation. We said share of voice, which is nothing but your GRPs, your sheer noise you're creating in the category or your brand versus the total category is actually correlating with the share of market. But that is also an important factor that cannot be ignored. So if you see that a brand is having a good share of voice, unfortunately there are dated products in the market, which means the share of voice is not translating into share of hand, which means there is something missing in that. So if it's not translating into share of hand and translating into share of market, possibly the share of heart and share of mind is not there for that particular brand. So something is missing. So how will you understand this, the missing piece, and then try to leverage to your advantage? So that's an important thing.
I find that very interesting. But I want to double-click on what you said now. Using the example you gave, where share of voice is not matching, sales volume, for example, in the retail stock. You talked about share of mind and share of art. In that scenario, what would you recommend to a brand? Let's say there's an SME, is an entrepreneur, watching this now, and suffering from that challenge. What would you recommend to such person to do, to fix that challenge?
So I think what is important is once you see there's a disconnect. Okay, so I'll say maybe go from share of expenses, which is your spends, share of your spends, which is share of expenses, SOE as we call it. Go to share of voice. Is it translating into maybe an equal or maybe a disproportionately higher share of voice? right? Simple thing like, when we use share of voice and we see a disproportionate angle in that, we then try to dissect the data and try to understand whether, is the ad duration different, right? Because cost of spot is very different when it comes to higher duration, right? But that higher duration doesn't really translate into the share of voice. Whether you use 60 seconds is the same share of voice, or use 30 seconds the same share of voice for you, right? So maybe that is one way of understanding. Then you get into, so the translation for me is where I built is, from share of voices is a deep that you take into share of market, but there are missing things which you to miss. That's a problem, which is what I call a share of heart, share of mind. Whether you really that share of voice is translated into consumers' heart, right? Is that brand making presence in the heart? Whether you like the brand, you dislike the brand, etc., etc. Because that also has to translate into the further shares that you want to achieve. So has that share of heart now, rather from share of voice, has it basically occupied your share of mind? Is your brand in the mind of the consumer? Is your brand then translating into the heart of the consumer? Is that translation happening into what we call it the share of hand? Share of hand is in the sense, maybe the term that I use, but it's more like share of wallet, right? So has it basically translated? So which has been action. So if I'm talking about, let's say, for example, a shampoo, if I'm talking about maybe a hair care brand, has it really translated from that share of expenses to share of voice to share of mind to share of heart to share of hand? Or that, when it comes to hair care, hair care is a complex category, right? It's not really translating to how it should achieve, maybe translate, and therefore that is impacting in possibly sales or maybe share of market or whatsoever. So I think the understanding is very important. So if you see a disconnect, then you need to find what is actually driving the disconnect, right? And here's where research comes in play, right? One of the food brands that we wanted to understand very well, because this brand is something which is a common, this category is very common in India, which is called flour, which make bread and all that stuff. So if you and there was from an unbranded to a branded. For example, if I give an example here, it could be maybe unbranded oil to branded oils, maybe farm oil to maybe something else or whatsoever, right? And we wanted to understand, why people are not choosing a particular, why people have so much of resistance to shift to branded flour, right? Because there was that's where we went into a qualitative understanding. And the qualitative understanding here was basically visiting houses of people and spending time in their kitchen, right? It's not an easy thing. Not everybody welcomes you. Different socioeconomic classifications have different reactions to all these things. So when a recruitment happens, we need to ensure that we have a good recruitment, which basically is not a particular SSC, but types of different socioeconomic classifications that we are able to understand. And understanding how they use. So the resistance was, yes, you have share of expenses, you have share of voice, but it's not translating into share of market. So let's understand what's missing. So that brand has possibly had share of mind but didn't translate into share of heart, and therefore there was a disconnect in share of hand, and therefore maybe share of market. The resistance was that I understand how best I can possibly get my flour, and there's nothing called, so even if you have branded flour, it is coming from the same wheat or same rice that I'm going to be doing myself. So why not I be in control in terms of what kind of maybe type of grain that I would want to use, and which is what is going to be in my plate and definitely in the stomach of my family. Why not I decide what I would want to do? So we understood where the problem was, right? After having understood the problem, that's where we basically went back and said, let's get back to the drawing board and ensure that we speak about how we choose the grain, right? Choosing the grain in a country of like India, you don't have a choice, right? What comes to your closest retail store, at the most you can possibly go to the wholesale market and get it, but you can't get the grains of one state and say I would want to maybe get grains from that state, or maybe types of different grains that I would want to, maybe multi-grain or whatever it is. And this bread is made from multi-grain, so which means basically these are the kind of ingredients, or these are the kind of. So how do you show that in a 30 seconds? is really important. How do you show that in a 60-second TVC or TV advert is very important. So when you go back and you understand the problem and you try to possibly recraft it, that's where research helps you. That's why you are able to understand everything and do what is expected to be done, so that you are able to then translate that equal share of voice into equal share of mind, into equal share of heart, into equal share of hand, and then definitely there will be a correlation in share of market. But when you look at two extremes, share of voice and share of market, if it doesn't correlate, you'll simply say it doesn't correlate. But why is it not correlating is what you need to understand.
Beautiful. There's a lot of data that go into that, like you rightly called out. And when you were speaking earlier, you spoke about the use of WhatsApp, to get data as well during this research. Which will lead me to my next question. What role do you think technology, into this dispensation play in marketing?
I would say, since you mentioned WhatsApp, let me also mention that it's so easy and so convenient when you form groups on WhatsApp. So, I gave you an example of tea, right? Instantly, I don't have to waste my time saying that, let me come back. No, okay, share with me what your kitchen looks like. So she will pick a picture and share. Okay, make a tea for yourself and show me what kind of tea you're drinking. It becomes so easy and fast that I'm doing a qualitative research. And when you do your qualitative research, your research is typically for 5 days, which is 8 hours into 5, which is 40 hours research, right? Imagine you're doing 40 hours of research in every household. Nobody's going to entertain you, right? So this is a simple example of how technology helps you. Okay, she's giving me a full video of what the kitchen looks like. She's telling me how she makes her tea. She's showing me maybe what kind of different brands of tea she has. So I think it's good enough for me to get a snapshot of what that consumer is like, and not just one, but other 10 who are there on that, qualitative conversation in that WhatsApp group, which the moderator is trying to. And the beauty is, it's not static in the sense that, I'm observing as an observer. The moderator is basically moderating the group, and the respondents who are there are responding to it. But if I see a typical pattern, okay, then I can possibly modify it. I can say, okay, hey moderator, I think I picked up something. Can you please zoom into that and possibly ask, why is it so? Or maybe I saw something in the kitchen and I need to know why it is so, right? So there's a flexibility there, right? So research typically helps you, and technology definitely helps you. Let's use maybe Gen AI.
Yep.
Okay. And the way I visualize Gen AI is a iceberg. Okay, so you have the AI, which is a solid rock, which is nothing but a lot of information, and that Gen AI is the tip of the iceberg. And the tip of the iceberg is visible and looking like a hard, solid thing because there's a huge iceberg actually which is holding it, So if you really look at our industry, okay, there's a lot of information which is available, right? And often I feel people are just scratching the surface, which means they're not taking that route of maybe doing deep dives or whatever it is. There could be issues. There could be, maybe a fear or maybe inertia. I don't know how to do this and so on and so forth. So we said, as much as we would want to change the world, not everybody is going to be changing, right? So we said, okay, why not bring in Gen AI capabilities and research that we have? So the tool that I was talking about, consumer connection panel, you said there's so much of information there from 6,000 panelists pan Nigeria, right? Only I who has designed the questionnaire or somebody who has designed the questionnaire will know what is there in that, right? But an alien person, although belongs to the agency, may not fully be aware as to what is there in that. So why not bring in maybe simple, maybe natural language processing, which is basically working on LLM and something of that sort, where you simply query and you get your results, right? So, okay, I want to know what is the consumption of social media in Lagos. You don't have to bother as to where do I go and click, how do I analyze the data, where is that I need to drill down. Simple natural language processing, I want to understand how much time people spend watching television in Lagos. Okay, contrast that with Abuja. Simple. I got my answer, right? Now, when you bring in these things, the gap that exists from, somebody who is having that inertia of using the tool is narrowing. Now, that is loud. Okay, there's love for that tool because it actually helps me get information on the go, right? So I don't have to bother as to, okay, I'm a non-media person, I'm a non-data person, I'm a non-research person, but there's a tool which possibly has it and I don't know how to use it. So that fear or that inertia has actually been overcome by Gen AI capability, so that you are able to, query and get whatever information, and it doesn't just give you responses. It helps you possibly take the next steps. Okay, fine, with this information, how do you translate into action? So then you're able to maybe do your strategy based on that, which is what our maybe next gen tool currently we have is speaking about. So these are things which are very important, right? So technology definitely is something which will help you get information. Technology is something which will definitely help you use that information in a meaningful manner, that it actually helps you action certain insight that you've been able to look at. So yeah, that's where we have to head, and that's where we have to ensure that we take advantage of these tools.
I think that's apt, particularly around the tool you just talked about now, CCP. And from the way you've explained it, I think I can relate to your data source, which is from the survey, research that you've done, right? Well, let's zoom out a little, right, and look at the landscape here in Nigeria, for example. Yes, Gen AI is great, but do you, and if it's something you've thought about before, what recommendations would you have, to ensure that the data that propels, or the data that our queries are built on for the marketing industry, for example, is real data, it's factual data. Yes, we'll talk about ChatGPT, in this climb, but or maybe CCP can help with that, right? But what I do not think there are any tools available out there, to the entire market that has like local data, Nigerian data across verticals, that can help marketers, get insights, and move as fast as possible. And if there are any, please share. But if there are none, what recommendations do you think the industry can collectively come together, to ensure that we have those?
Correct. So we use this term called as syndicated and proprietary, right? Consumer connection is proprietary, and the example that I gave you about the iceberg is typically what we have replicated in that. So if you really want to view the tip of the iceberg, it has to rest on something, and that is the hard solid rock, and which is where the credible data that we have, which is done by a research agency which we have commissioned, is doing, and we are basically monitoring everything right from questionnaire design. So we know that the information that we're capturing is credible, the information that we're capturing is important and is relevant, right? So it has to be actionable. That's the reason we're doing that. Now cut to the syndicated tool, right, which is where everybody will have access to, whether for maybe paid subscription or pre-subscription is something which only time will tell, and maybe government has a role to play in that. But visualize that CCP that we currently have as a proprietary tool is made public by enhancing and expanding what it can offer, right? And expansion can only happen by way of maybe more panelists, pan Nigeria, 36 states plus Abuja, and so on and so forth, right? And it can, when it comes to research, there's a direct correlation of the sample expansion and cost, and that's why we have 6,000 and not 60,000, right? So just imagine if we are able to maybe have 60,000 panelists on Nigeria coverage with a margin of error maybe 4% or whatsoever, it makes it much more easier. Now the question is who pays for it, right? So the thing is, if you need something like that, there has to be maybe a hybrid model which possibly starts with subscription and then it's made free for certain sectors and so on and so forth, right? Now, for example, if all the industry stakeholders come together, which is not just maybe media agencies but including advertisers, broadcasters, etc., I'm sure that ecosystem will help fuel what maybe the country wants to see in future, right? And that's where we are. So the research exists, the principles of research exist, the credibility exists, technology exists, everything exists. Only thing is missing is basically the intention. I wouldn't say intention, but maybe the funding, right? Intent, everybody has to ensure that we have something good and credible, but the funding part is important.
I love that bit. And this is a strong call to action, actually. And for anybody watching now, right, key stakeholders within the ecosystem that are interested in, taking a content to the next level, there's a prototype that works, CCP, if they want to engage, if they want to support, if they want to collaborate, on some of these things.
Absolutely.
How can they engage with you?
They can simply reach out to us or reach out to me, and the delight moment is for my team to basically show them what the tool is like, and show them the use cases, including how a simple query can get them results, and more important, how we've been able to also bring in capabilities of maybe transforming what a manual job would look like. For example, simple questionnaire design, which was again a fear or an inertia. I do not know how to write a questionnaire for research. Don't bother, right? Tell us what your brief is, and it's not about me asking the question. It's all simulated in the dashboard. So it's simple Q&A. In less than 5 minutes you have your questionnaire ready, versus somebody spending a day and also not having confidence whether this questionnaire is right or wrong has been overcome, right? So we've also understood different pain points when it comes to our industry. So let's look at it from a module perspective, and we've made it very modular in that sense. Okay, questionnaire design is a problem and a pain point. Not everybody is familiar with questionnaire design. How do we ensure that the best in class, which includes repository of questionnaire and cloning it, etc., you are able to then design a questionnaire based on category, challenges, market, etc., right? Including maybe what we've been able to do with Gen AI to ensure that simple query translates into what you possibly can visualize. Somebody who's very brainy and good in analyzing data is doing that job for free using Gen AI. That's what the world wants. That's what you want to ensure. So, which means you're not wasting your time in analyzing your data. You're actually using the data and the time at your hand to make it more actionable for you, so that you are able to deliver better results to your clients. That's what we're trying to do.
So we'll put Patrick's email or someone's contact here while watching. If you find it below within the comment section, feel free to reach out if this interests you. We really need to collaborate as an industry to ensure that we have data, not just for this generation and no more, for the future generation and the advancement of this industry going into the future. I want to dial back a little, Patrick. You have so much of experience working in India, and you moved to Africa, you moved to Nigeria. What was your first experience like, coming into the African market? And what levers would you say is pulled to help you remain true to the values that you uphold, and helping you deliver, at that top level where you currently sit?
So that's an interesting one. This part of the world was never in my list to be explored. Okay, I used to work in the Middle East, where I was heading the Nokia business, working with Mediacom then. I was responsible for, in those days, which goes back in about 20 years ago. Almost 20 years ago. The markets, they were defined based on what people felt like. So it was called MENA market. MENA in the sense Middle East, North Africa. So which also included countries like Iran, Iraq, Pakistan, which were media dark. Iraq was media dark then. Even you put an ad in a newspaper, you're not sure whether the ad has appeared. And then, sometimes it would appear in some part of Iraq in black and white, some part of Iraq in color, and so on and so forth. So there was a lot of experience in, understanding these markets. Definitely the GCC, the Egypt and the Lebanon and few other Syria and all that stuff. So then the reconfiguration came in play, and then he said, we now need to look at MEA, which is Middle East and Africa. So we wanted to have a very good understanding, and we struggled. We never had a very good understanding of the media landscape of Nigeria, never had a very good understanding of media landscape of Kenya, Ghana, Sierra Leone or whatever it is, Benin or Cote d'Ivoire. So we said, where will we have this information? So we said, this continent is not like one country, it has got many countries in that. And I said, maybe sometimes in life, if I get an opportunity, I will definitely explore. From Middle East, I went back to India and I spent almost 10 years there before I came in here. And it has been a pleasant journey. And when I landed here, I was handed a book called Media Fact Book, and I said, I wish I would have got this Media Fact Book then, because in that Media Fact Book, it gave me a media landscape of 23 markets in West Africa. And I said, wow, this is like wealth of information, and how come I didn't get it when I wanted it? So the beauty is, yes, you discover many things, not by staying far, but definitely getting closer to the market. And I was pleasantly surprised when I came into Nigeria. I mean, if you really look at this market is a gem. Okay, I'll give you several examples. One is definitely when you try to understand this market, so your land is so fertile. Okay, so even if you grow, maybe sow seeds, you are able to reap the benefits in very short span of time. That basically shows what fertility you are possibly sitting on, and that's gold mine, right? Agriculture can be a big thing here, right? I mean, you can export to the world, really, right? And somebody has to see the potential. If you see the real estate sector, this market can go through a transformation when it comes to real estate. Okay, I mean, this possibly the skyline what you see today, or versus what it was maybe 12 years before when I came in, and what possibly it could be in the next 25 years or 30 years can be very different, provided somebody really looks at this as a sector, and so on and so forth. Now, I would try to maybe play a technology role. Let's look at agriculture. Okay, so for me, how do we ensure that maybe AI or Gen AI can help solve Nigeria's grassroots problem when it comes to agriculture? Huge potential. Agriculture itself is such a huge potential. When you look at technology playing a pivotal role in helping solve grassroots problems of Nigeria when it comes to agriculture, the thing which you can imagine are exponentially that can help you transform this market, right? Pick up sectors, real estate, big thing, right? Pick up, and it's not just sectors that I'm talking for somebody's profitability. Imagine the labor force that gets into it. Imagine maybe construction gets developed, and then therefore maybe the things that can possibly get utilized. For example, it could be the wood, it could be maybe water heaters, it could be taps, it could be pipes, it could be many things. So there's a lot of things which will go into that, and that is how it will help the economy, right? And the more and more you are able to ensure that it is basically homegrown and you're becoming self-sufficient, and you're not dependent on maybe imports and so on and so forth, it will create enough opportunities for this market and ensure that your GDP, maybe strives to maybe grow at a speed which possibly has never been before, right? So there's a lot of potential, and somebody has to see that potential. Somebody has to ensure that this potential is then converted into something which is actionable, so that you are able to reap the benefits, maybe not in short span, but definitely in the next 2 to 3 decades, so to say. But it has to get started. So yes, I mean, there's a huge potential in this market, is where I see the gap currently.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I want to go a bit deeper. You had said that you found media by chance, right? But you've done so well, in that space. I really want to box in the digital world, because I know you have so much of a background even with the quote and unquote traditional media, but the conversation these days is moving towards omnichannel, right? What role do you think that the synergy between for lack of better, offline and online, can bear, for a forward-thinking brand?
I think this is the problem that many of us have created by building China walls. There isn't any China wall. Consumers are basically, through the line. There's no above the line, below the line, or whatsoever, right? And I think the day we collapsed with China was, and what I call is, don't think of mass communication, think of mass customization. Okay, customize based on the cohort that you observe. Now, the simple thing is, understand mothers. Okay, and when you understand the mothers very well, whether then maybe bifurcate, maybe working mothers, housewives, or maybe non-working mothers, or whatever you would want to call, the different understanding. But you should be able to customize a media plan, not by gender, age, or social economic classification, but simply calling them who they are, mothers or working mothers. Right? When you put in context of working mother and you're able to do mass customization, not mass communication, then certainly you are able to visualize the entire journey. Right? You may not be 100% accurate, but you cannot be too wrong also. At least are having a good understanding of 70 to 80% of what it should be, and therefore you are able to customize for your mass audience that you are able to look at. So I think the journey is very important. Okay, and the simple tool that we use in our media planning, whether it is traditional or digital or whatever it is, we simply use what we call as part to purchase. Okay, and it's a simple tool where you are able to map the journey. Okay, so from not knowing to knowing, from knowing to consuming, not consuming to consuming more often, and in the journey you're able to identify maybe areas that you can possibly see consumers going off track. That's why media comes in play, and then you're able to think of what is that you need to bring in that can get them back on the track, and that's communication, right? And communication could be maybe a different communication or a different ad or whatever it is, that really for you to decide. But if you're able to map the journey, it can't go wrong. You'll be 70 to 80% correct in terms of what the journey is looking like, and then you are able to create that autopilot mode. But important is to understand that journey. A simple tool like part to purchase, the power is unimaginable in that, provided we apply it, provided we take time. And that's where research would come in also play to understand, because you can't be sitting in your office and imagining that it could be something like that, right? It has to be something like that, provided it's infused with some amount of data. And that's where you possibly also go and find maybe what are the media apertures that you can think of. Once you understand the media apertures is where you possibly go and leverage it by leveraging that media apertures that you've been able to identify in that part to purchase.
Beautiful. So essentially, the part to purchase should influence and guide even the choice of media, the choice of channel, even the strategy for communication, right?
Correct. Simple thing like, for example, I'm feeling hungry. Okay, that hunger is a realization which is a trigger for the part to purchase. So if I'm feeling hungry, I need to eat food, right? So what kind of food am I evaluating? So there could be multiple things, not that everybody thinks maybe, similar. I might want to maybe go for something which is healthy. I might want to go for something which is bellyful. I want to go for something which is whatever, right? And that's where your communication comes in play. For example, I'm at work, I'm feeling hungry, and I've stepped out of office and I possibly see an outdoor billboard which tells me, buy one, get one free. It's good enough. Or maybe I've come across maybe a communication which I've been watching while I'm in the office, maybe a simple YouTube unskippable ad which possibly is from Glovo, tell me that I can order my food from using Glovo or whatever it is for my favorite restaurant or maybe a street shop or whatever it is. It's good enough, right? So that's a good way of maybe applying that tool and saying that this is what your part to purchase can help you maybe unearth and possibly find those insights into how you should try to leverage the opportunities.
Makes sense.
Yeah,
makes sense. And I think you can't do that without properly understanding your consumer or your target audience and
Absolutely.
segments then properly.
Absolutely. Segmentation is very important. See, there is when even for example the example that I gave you, which is mothers, putting them into a homogeneous cohort may seem like you're generalizing their behavior. There is an heterogeneity in that. So how do you understand the heterogeneity? By maybe segmenting it, right? So working mothers, non-working mothers, or maybe housewives or whatever it is, maybe they could be different in Lagos versus in Kano, right? Once you understand the size and the strength of them is when you try to maybe map it. So maybe in Lagos, I would want to, while I'm talking to mothers in Lagos, I would want to talk to working mothers, and talking to mothers in Kano, I would want to talk to housewives. you'll be very clear, right, who you want to talk, and zeroing onto that segment or the lowest hanging fruit that you believe is going to be very important, because you have very limited resources. You don't have multiple resources, or you don't have maybe infinite tools, or other infinite or other money which basically has been given as a free pro to you. You have a fixed budget. How do you ensure that fixed budget translates into something which is going to be delivering on the KPIs? Right. So typically, clients have their business objective, they have their marketing objective, they'll have their communication objective, and they'll have their media objective. So when you visualize the journey or the hierarchy of objectives, you're sitting there at media at the bottom, which means if you have a very good understanding of the objectives, your strategies that you develop has to ensure that it is a testimony of what possibly it can deliver. So you deliver bottom up. So you deliver your media strategy, to ensure that your media objectives, that's how your communication objectives, your marketing objectives, and your business objectives will be delivered. So you have to ensure that your resources are basically translating into ROI, or return on ad spend, as they call it, right? And that's very important, because how to apply your understanding is very important. That same ROS one can go for a toss if you do not really look at those segments, can give you better results, right? So that's really what it is. The efforts are okay, but the results are equally important. I would say more important than the effort. So apply your efforts in the direction that will help you get you better ROAS and definitely deliver better ROI to the business.
Oh, that's quite profound. I want to also check in with you, because looking at your journey, right? You spent most of the years, almost 3 decades, with agencies. Was that intentional?
Yeah, it's love, I would say. It's love, I would say. My partner, I met her at the very first job in media, and she was my boss. I learned a lot of things from her, and she continues to be my boss. I have over a period of time, I've been finding joy in everything that I do, right? And that's really has helped me to progress in maybe what are the avenues that I should be looking at. So yes, I got into media from a technology background, not by choice. I loved it because the sheer joy that I would possibly enjoy, that I planned for a brand which was Cadbury's then. You plan for a brand, and you are able to see that plan coming to life by way of advertising that you wish to see, right? If people watch this particular program, am I there? If people watch this program, am I there? Etc. etc. So that sheer joy told me that wow, this is brilliant, right? Then, so if you really look at the progress of how maybe in the last couple of decades, not years, has been, yes. So there is data. At some point in time, data gave that, maybe that, I would say, the point of inflection to the industry. So love for data. Digital, at some point in time, digital gave that point of inflection to this industry. Digital, love for digital. That's how I ensured that I learned digital. So data and research. E-commerce, at some point in time, gave that inflection, and therefore, love for e-commerce. AI, which is now currently, is the point of inflection for us to ensure that, if you miss that point of inflection, possibly you go down the drain, right? So you need to ensure that there are different challenges by choice or not by choice that are coming to you. You see that as point of inflection, which is what the industry has experienced and over a period of time has grown, is what you go with. You go with the flow and ensure that you take that as a challenge head on, and you learn versus, having a fear of failure.
I find that interesting because when you put it that way, it means that at every point in time, let's say in every decade, for example, there's something new to look out for, like they said, that point of inflection, then gets you to want to do more because there's something new that is challenging and you want to do more and give more value, on that bit. I love that. I have just 3 more questions before we let you go. But to a young boy, or young girl watching this now, from a university room, not so clear on what to do, with their life, but they're creative, they have that apt for data. They're not necessarily clear that there's a space or an industry, like advertising industry, right? But watching this, they find it interesting and they want to become like you. What levers, would you say they pull, or what advice will you give to them? So that in a couple of years, they can be as sound as you.
Correct. So thanks for asking that. I have applied a simple acronym in life, and which is the child acronym. Okay, which is spelled as CHILD. It has a lot of meaning. C stands for curiosity. Okay, if there's no curiosity, you never progress. So that curiosity is very important. H is hunger. You need to have that hunger, okay, to progress in life, to many things, and so on and so forth. Right? That's the H of child. Then you have I, which is yourself, I, right? And it's a question that you would ask in front of the mirror every day. Who am I? Okay, and that I has many meanings. It could be ideas, it could be innovation, it could be intelligence. So you apply the I that you would want to, apply. And then L, which is learning, and D is developing. They're two different things. You learn, you develop, you learn, you develop, you learn, and you develop, you learn, and develop. Right? So apply this acronym, and if you really go back and see yourself as a child, or you even see maybe if you have a child in your house, the child is living up to those acronyms. The child is curious, the child is hungry for food, right? The child is inquisitive, the child is learning, the child is developing. So if you were a child at some point in time, why do you stop being a child? Continue to be a child. Right? Today I am a child. I have experience which tells me that you don't need to be a child. But if I stop being a child, there's no vision and mission in life for me, right? So, and for me it is important because see, for me, I have a vision in life and I have a mission. My mission is to ensure that I apply this child acronym, and my vision is to ensure that I achieve success from what I'm trying to do. Right? So the moment you stop learning is where you now need to stop living. Right? So if you have to live, you have to stop. You have to continue learning. Right? The other thing is education will not get you everything. Right? I have a different principle for training and development. Right? And I use the 3E framework here. Okay, education is just 10%. Right? The 90% is your experience and exposure. So if I teach somebody something, and if that person is not having the experience even little, that education is not going to be helping him or her. Right? And if that person is not going to be having exposure in that field, that education and that experience is going to be wastage. So your education is 10%, your experience is maybe another 20%, and your exposure is supposed to be 70%. So if that is the configuration, then choose that education that is going to be helping you where your exposure is, where your experience is, and then go for the right education. Right? Simple thing. For example, if you are in creative, right, that's the exposure that you have, and you have very little experience in that, great, because creative is not something which you discover at some point in life. Maybe that's something which you picked up as you progress in life. So creativity exists in you have that exposure. You need to have little experience, and then you go for your fine-tuning of your skills, whether it is using AI or whatever maybe you would want to learn as hard skills, including soft skills. That's where the education part will come in. And imagine that it's just going to be 10%, because you really need to put proportion to this. Okay, and if you think that 70% education, that's not how it's going to be, right? So that's very important. The third thing is maybe finish your school, finish your maybe masters if you wish to do, but then enroll into maybe some kind of a program. Now we have fortunately in this part of the world called Alphabet Media Academy. Okay, and Alphabet Media Academy has, which is again approved by ARCON. It has, a certificate program, which is a 10-weekend program, and then it also has a diploma program, right? So diploma basically helps you to ensure that you spend more time, which you spend 3 weekends, right? And the diploma allows you to also be part of maybe an internship program for 6 months. So if there are opportunities like this, and if you want to come to maybe media advertising as an industry, you can definitely enroll into Alphabet Media Academy. Best is to go for a diploma if you're looking for a career, and ensure that you get the training, which is again by the industry for the industry. So which means you have people who are experts in the industry who come and teach on weekend, which is Saturday and Sunday, and you also get an opportunity to do your 6 months internship. And if you're really successful, then you start your career in media advertising. I would say you guys are fortunate here because you have something which doesn't come at a cost which is going to be, taking a lot of money from you. Back then in India, we have, you finish your university and then you have to go for your maybe competitive exams to get into something like this. Here, there's no competitive exam, right? And again, to get into maybe something similar, which you go back in India and see, is very difficult. So there are avenues. You just need to know where to get to, provided you're clear, and then get started, because really that's really the beginning of your journey in media advertising. And at Alphabet Media Academy, we've delivered almost 20 cohorts, which means over 500 to 600 students have graduated from that academy, right? And it's not going to be costing you, much. Yes, definitely there's a small cost, but that cost is nothing, I would say it's insignificant to what you can possibly gain, which is knowledge and the wealth of information that you'll have to jumpstart your career.
True. Matter of fact, I'm an alumni of Alphabet Media Academy, so it's something I would recommend to you too as well. Two more questions before we let you go, Patrick. And this is personal. But it ties very, very nicely to a very big problem as well. So the problem of talent. Talent is critical, in the line of business that you do, right? Just to ensure that you have people who are not just thought leaders, but people that can get their hands dirty to ensure they know to timelines in that fast-paced environment. And for me, I remember when I just started, when you had recruited me at the time at Digital Plus, there are skills. I don't know how you found out or how you did it, but you had given me a task. You told me to develop an infographics, at the time for to tell a story. I wasn't sure what you saw in me, to give me that task at the time. But the question here is, as a leader, what are those things you look out for, to recruit people, recruit talent, into your organization? And I ask this question intentionally. There are people out there, that are looking for jobs. They believe they have what it takes, to work in a fast-paced environment like this, but not too clear on what to polish or what to do to get them into rooms where they get those jobs. So connecting that to this question, what are some of those things you look out for, to recruit talents in your business?
So one is definitely the field that you come from. I don't want to maybe say that this field is not apt for this kind of an industry. I mean, somebody who's studied, for example, I've studied technology, but I come from an accounting background, right? So an accounting person coming into maybe a media is never something which one can imagine. Yes, I'm there. I'm an living example of what it is, right? So when I meet people, right, I have battery of questions, okay, and those battery of questions are nothing but maybe I would say from somebody who is not experienced to experienced, somebody who's coming from a field which is non-related to a field which is related or whatsoever. So there are typically 5 sets, I would say. I would like to maybe apply in when I meet somebody who's an alien, okay. And in my journey, I try to ensure that being an alien, not knowing that person to possibly knowing that person, and then finally getting to be an acquaintance and then a friend is what I try to apply. And that's where possibly you shared an example, because in our conversation, I think I picked up things which you had interest for strategy and you had, fascination for creativity and so on and so forth. I said, okay, fine. Why don't you maybe create something? So it's about giving somebody, that blissful moment to be in, right? And the moment you create that maybe synergy is where you possibly will see whether you are in the right direction, because that's how there are ways of working. So simple conversation like these are my ways of working, these are your ways of working. So you cannot work my way, I cannot work your way, but there has to be a meeting ground somewhere, right? So those are important things. One of the things which I've applied is also the engagement model, which is by a company called Blessing White. What they try to do is simple, which is what we never think of. They say when you create job is when two things intersect, okay, when an employee and an employer, right? So the employee, with the intersection is creating a job, but in that intersection, what is that employer trying to achieve? The employer is trying to achieve contribution from that employee, right? And that employee is trying to achieve something from that intersection is basically satisfaction. So when you look at contribution and satisfaction is the equation one is trying to look at. So you understanding of that equation and where you sit, whether you're sitting at the apex where you're contributing and you're satisfied, is excellent. But that cannot be constant for life as far as that engagement is concerned, or that intersection is concerned. So the moment you start moving from the apex to down, or maybe to the right or to the left, is where you're getting disengaged, right? So what is causing that disengagement is what you need to understand, right? You cannot force somebody to do something, right? So maybe something which is causing that disengagement, maybe can I bring in some stimulus over here which will possibly get that person back on the track to move from disengaged to now being an engaged employee, is where you try to look at things and you ensure that you finally get that person back to that apex what you wanted him or her to be at, which is the engaged employee, where he's contributing and you are satisfied with his or rather he's satisfied or she's satisfied, and you're getting what you want from the contribution he or she should make to the business. That's what it is.
Thanks so much for sharing that. Finally, before we let you go, Patrick, what's your vision for Africa?
My vision for Africa is simple. One is definitely we must understand the true potential of this continent, not this country which is Nigeria, but definitely Africa as a whole, and then show to the world that what this country or this continent can provide. I'm very happy that when you look at picture awards, which started from Nigeria, then moved to West Africa, then Africa, and then we have many other agencies and countries that participate, has seen a journey of evolution. And the Cannes festival that happened this year, which just ended last week, Picture Awards was able to create picture showcase at Cannes, which means they were able to showcase the creativity that exists in Africa to the audience that came to Cannes. That's powerful, right? Whether you look at media advertising is one thing, but there's so many things. You look at music. Today, music has traveled from this part of the continent to the world, right? And the music that is popular here is also popular at times in India, and I'm assuming it's everywhere in the world. I think the creativity that exists in this part of the world is something which the world needs to experience. So when you go to the mecca of advertising awards, which is Cannes, it's a good thing that Picture Awards has done, where they're able to showcase the Picture Award wins at Cannes for the audience that comes there, and I think that's a great thing. So for me, the vision is the true potential has to be really understood. I spoke about agriculture. I mean, I would say the potential is huge. The potential is really huge, and what this country can possibly create is massive. Development. When you look at how real estate as a sector can contribute to the GDP or can be the backbone of this economy, it can be outstanding. I mean, it's unimaginable. Today, if you look at India and look at the city that I come from, Mumbai, real estate is the backbone of that economy. If anything happens to real estate, the economy will collapse. I'm giving you a simple example, So why not possibly look at examples that are possibly developed markets or developing markets and try to apply, as to how we can overcome certain challenges. If you look at really, media as a sector or media advertising as a sector, the contribution that media advertising as a sector is doing to the GDP is insignificant today, right? And how do you ensure that, maybe other developing markets, or maybe the top economies in the world, maybe the US, the China, and maybe India, you really look at what is really happening in that sector or in that country that they're doing for media and advertising, which is fueling growth and ensuring that their contribution is 0.5 or 0.8% or whatever, that is to the GDP is seen, right? So we really need to understand the potential exists. One is we need to see it and we need to translate that into action so that we are able to, get this sleeping giant, to wake up and roar and ensure that the world sees them. For me, that is really the happiness and the joy I will derive once I'm able to see it. I'm very happy about Picture Award this time. I mean,